The return of Toad. The rat put out a neat little brown paw, gripped Toad firmly by the scruff of the neck, and gave a great hoist and a pull. The waterlogged Toad came up slowly but surely over the edge of the hole. At last, he stood safe and sound in the hall, streaked with mud and weed, and with the water streaming off of him. "Oh, Ratty," he cried, "I've been through such time since I last saw you." "Toad," said the water rat firmly, "you go off upstairs at once and take off that old cotton rag that looks as if it once belonged to a washerwoman. Clean yourself and put on some of my clothes. Now be off. I'll have something to say to you later."
Oh, no.
Right? You've got that sternness coming in. Yeah. Toad was at first inclined to do some talking back. He had had enough of being ordered about. However, he caught sight of himself in the looking glass. A looking glass is probably a what? Mirror. With the bonnet perched over one eye, and he changed his mind. He went very quickly upstairs to the rat's dressing room. There he had a thorough wash and changed his clothes. Rat and Toad catch up over lunch. By the time he came down again, luncheon was on the table. While they ate, Toad told the rat about his adventures. When at last Toad had talked himself to a standstill, there was silence for a while, and then the rat said, "Now, Toady, on your own admission, you have been handcuffed, imprisoned, starved, chased, terrified out of your life, insulted, jeered at, flung into the water by a woman, too. Don't you see what a fool you've been making of yourself? And all because you stole a motor car." Toad heaved a deep sigh and said very humbly, "Quite right, Ratty. I can quite see that. But now I'm going to be a good Toad. As for motor cars, I've not been so keen on them for quite a while. I have something else in mind, but all in good time. Let's have our coffee, and then I'll stroll down to Toad Hall." "Stroll down to Toad Hall?" cried the rat, greatly excited. "Do you mean to say you haven't heard?" "Heard what?" said Toad, rather pale. "Do you mean to tell me," shouted Rat, "that you've heard nothing about the stoats and the weasels?" "What? The Wildwooders?" cried Toad, trembling in every limb. "What have they been doing? And how have they been taken, or how they've been at taken Toad Hall?" continued the rat. Toad leaned his elbows on the table, and a large tear welled up in each of his eyes. "Go on, Ratty," he murmured presently. "Tell me all. When you got into that trouble of yours," said the rat. Toad merely nodded. "Well, it was a good deal talked about," explained the rat. "The river bankers stuck up for you, but the wildwood animals said it served you right, and they went about saying you would never come back again." Toad nodded once more. "The mole and the badger insisted that you would come back again, somehow." Toad began to sit up in the chair again and smirk a little. "They were so sure that they would never be seen again," continued the rat, "that they arranged to move their things into Toad Hall. And so one dark night a band of weasels crept silently up the driveway. Simultaneously a body of desperate ferrets took possession of the kitchen garden and backyard and offices, while a company of smirking stoats occupied the conservatory and the billiard room." What a good question. It's a game that people play. It's like, do you know what pool is? It's another word for that. So if you look at this picture here, you can start to see two scenes going on, right? So you see that we've got Toad and Rat talking, and then you can see the image up there where they've got Mole and Badger, and then who's behind them? Those weasels. Toad learns of the fate of Toad Hall. The mole and the badger were sitting by the fire when those bloodthirsty villains broke down the door and rushed in upon them. They were unharmed and taken by surprise. Those two poor faithful creatures were turned out into the cold. The Wildwooders have been living in Toad Hall ever since, concluded the rat. Oh, have they? Said Toad, getting up and seizing a stick. I'll see about that. It's no good, Toad, called the rat after him. You better come back and sit down. You'll only get into trouble. But the toad was off. He marched rapidly down the road, fuming and muttering to himself till he got near the front gate. At that moment, there popped up from behind him a paling of long, yellow ferret with a gun. Palings are fences that are made out of the pointed stakes. So the pointed.
Is it like coffee?
I think a little bit different. More like fancy, less harmful. Who comes there? Said the ferret sharply. Stuff and nonsense, said Toad very angrily. What do you mean by talking like that to me? Come out here at once or I'll. The ferret said never a word, but he brought his gun to the shoulder. Toad proudly dropped flat in the road and bang! A bullet whisked over his head. What'd the ferret try and do? The startled Toad scrambled to his feet and scampered off as hard as he could. He went back, very crestfallen, and told the water rat. What did I tell you? Said the rat. They've got sentries posted, and all of them are armed. You must just wait. Still, Toad was not inclined to give in all at once. So he got out the boat and set off rowing up the river to where the garden front of Toad Hall came to the waterside. Arriving within sight of his old home, he surveyed the land cautiously. All seemed very peaceful and quiet. He could see the whole front of Toad Hall glowing in the evening sunshine. He could even try the boathouse first, he thought. Very warily, he paddled up the mouth of the creek and was just passing under the bridge when crash! Whoops. Toad scouts out Toad Hall from the river. A great stone dropped from above, smashed through the bottom of the boat, and the boat filled and sank, and Toad found himself struggling in deep water. It'll be your head next time, Toady, the stoats called after him. The indignant Toad swam to shore while they laughed and laughed. The Toad retraced his weary way on foot and related his disappointed experience to the water rat once more. Well, what did I tell you? Said the rat very crossly. And now, look here. See what you've been and done? Lost me my boat, and that I was so fond of. The Toad saw at once how foolishly he had acted. He had admitted his errors and made a full apology to Rat. Ratty, I see that I have been headstrong and a willful Toad. Henceforth, I will take no action without your advice and full approval. If that is really so, said the good-natured rat, already appeased, then my advice to you is to have some supper. In addition, do nothing until we have seen the mole and the badger and taken their advice. Oh, yes, of course, said the mole and the badger. Toad said, what's come of them, my dear fellows? Well, may you ask, said the Toad reproachfully. While you were riding about the country in expensive motor cars, those poor devoted animals were trying every which way to get your property back for you. You don't deserve to have such loyal friends. And an ungrateful beast I've been. I know, Toad sobbed, shedding bitter tears. Let me go out and find them, out into the cold, dark night. Hold on a bit, surely. I heard the chink of dishes on a tray. Supper here at last. Hooray! Come on, Ratty. They had just finished their meal when there came a heavy knock at the door. Who do you think is at the door? Toad was nervous, but the rat, nodding mysteriously at him, went straight to the door and opened it. And in walked Badger. How does Badger look?
That's it.
Mr. Badger arrives. Mr. Badger looked decidedly bedraggled. He came solemnly up to Toad, shook him by the paw, and said, "Welcome home." Toad's, alas, this is a poor homecoming. And he turned his back on him and helped himself to a large slice of pie.
Oh. Badger. What pie?